Hello everyone, welcome back to EEE 641 Advanced Electromagnetic Field Theory. In today's lecture, lecture 20, we are going to continue our discussion on scattering by canonical structures. And in today's lecture, what we are going to do is we are going to discuss and derive the expression of radar cross section or echo area for rectangular plate. And in addition to that, we will also construct the solutions for the, or we will try to represent the wave propagation of a wave, plane wave in cylindrical coordinate components. Okay, so we'll try to represent that plane wave solution in terms of Bessel function and phi components. So that is the second part what we are going to discuss in this class, in addition to scattering by the rectangular plates. And in the end, we will also discuss some mathematical theorems like addition theorem for the Hankel function, addition theorem for the Bessel function, in order to lay the foundation for discussing the scattering from the cylindrical structures with a circular cross section. We'll see why do we require those kind of theorems, addition theorem of Hankel function or addition theorem of Bessel function, and we'll go through the entire derivation. So in this class, basically we are going to go through three main components. One is first we will discuss the scattering from the rectangular plate for both polarization, TE as well as TM. After that, we'll also go through the solution for the scattering from the circular plate. Okay, and then in the second part, we'll discuss how can we represent plane waves in the cylindrical coordinate components. And in the third part of this lecture, we'll discuss and derive some addition theorem for Hankel function as well as Bessel function, which we'll use in the next lecture when we'll discuss or derive the expression for the scattering from the cylindrical structure with this circular cross section. So let's start this first topic, that is rectangular plate. So this is our geometry. Okay, and in this geometry, as you can see that rectangular plate is basically in the XY plane. So in the Y direction, it has a dimension B, and in the X direction, the total dimension is A. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to consider a plane wave which is coming or incidenting on this plate in the YZ plane. So our plane of incidence is going to be YZ plane, that is going to be this plane. Okay, and what we are going to do is, we are going to derive expression for the scattering field scattered by this plate, and then based on that E and H field, we are going to derive the expression for the radar cross section, echo area, 3D bistatic and monostatic RCS. So again, this is the two-dimensional geometry of the same structure, and as we can see that now we have a plane of incidence as YZ plane. YZ plane is our plane of incidence, and you can see that now your E vector is parallel to YZ plane. Okay, so you can call this as a parallel polarization. We also discussed the same thing even in the last lecture when we discussed the scattering from the strip, right? If you remember. So this polarization can also, polarization can also be called parallel polarization, since the E vector is parallel to plane of incidence, and that is in this case YZ plane. Also this polarization can also be called TE to X polarization. Why? Because your E vector is basically parallel to YZ plane. In other words, it's perpendicular to X direction. So your E field is perpendicular to X direction. So that's why this field is also called TE to X polarization. Now in optics, this kind of polarization is also called hard polarization. Based on some diffraction theory, this kind of polarization is called hard polarization. And the other one, which is going to be TM to X or perpendicular polarization, is called soft polarization. Okay, So keep in mind that this TE to X polarization is also called hard polarization, as well as we can call that parallel polarization since E vector is parallel to plane of incidence, and that is YZ plane. So again, TE to X polarization. So first we will derive expression for TE to X, and then we will just go through the solutions of TM to X. So we will go through the TE to X solutions in detail. So again, this is the geometry, and this is going to be your incident wave. E vector is parallel to plane of incidence, that is YZ plane. So it's parallel polarization. And we know how to construct this solution, how to write expression for the incident plane wave. So in our case, since our E vector is parallel to YZ plane, so there are two components for E vector. One is Y component, that is AY, and the other one is AZ component, right? And if we define this theta I with respect to Z direction, then we can define this E vector like this, okay? As well as in also in addition to that, your K vector, which is going to be in positive Y direction and negative Z direction, as you can see from here. So you can see that this is your direction for the K vector. So which is going to be some positive component of Y, and it has some negative component for Z, correct? So based on that, this will be your expression for E field, and this will be your expression for H field. So here first we actually define the expression for H field, and then we know that for the plane wave, in order to get the E field, corresponding E field, you simply multiply it by intrinsic impedance, and that is going to be eta, right? So from that, basically you get the expression for the E field from the H field. You use that basically Maxwell's equations, right? Now using that, these two expressions, if we use this physical optics approximation, where basically your surface current density is going to be 2 times n cap cross Hi at Z equals to 0 and Y equals to Y prime, right? That is basically nothing but this particular plane, okay? When we are talking about this particular plane, the Z is going to be 0 and Y prime is going to be a location where you have a source. So based on that, we see that our expression for Js, surface current density, is going to be something like this. So we have only one component for Js, that is Ay component. So our current distribution is going to be in 3 dimension. It's going to be something like this along the Y direction, right? For the entire rectangular plate. So that is going to be our equivalent current density, surface current density, using physical optics approximation. How do we get that? We have derived that in the last lecture as well as the lecture before that. So basically, since we have PEC, we assume that your tangential component of H field basically will result into this current density, surface current density, okay? And from that, we know that if you have only electric current density, then again we went through these steps in the last lecture when we defined scattering from the strip, that if you have just electrical current density, then you will have only two integrals, n theta and n phi. So you have only two integrals. L theta and L phi is going to be 0 since your magnetic current density is 0. So using this expression for n theta, and also in that equation, what we are going to do is for ds prime, it will be dx prime times dy prime, since our plate is laid in the xy plane. Also our r prime cosine psi is given by this one. Again, we have gone through all these steps in the last lecture in detail, right? So I'm not going to go into detail, but this is what we are going to use. And based on that, in addition to that, we are going to have this kind of integral where you will have symmetric boundaries for your integral. So we know that for this kind of integral, it's a standard integral equation. We get a sinc function. So for exponential with this kind of symmetric boundaries, bounded integral, basically it will be a sinc function like this. So we will use this standard integral, and when we use that, this will be your final expression for n theta, and you will have this two sinc function, sin x by x and sin y by y, where x and y are given by these two expressions respectively. Similarly, this will be your expression for n phi, which is again similar to what we have done for n theta. And when we evaluate that, this will be your final expression for the n phi. Again, you write that expressions, those expressions in terms of x and y and in sinc function like this. So when we do that, using those integrals n theta and n phi, we can write or we can find the far field distribution radiated or scattered by that equivalent current density. And we know that ER is going to be almost going to be 0. Okay, we have gone through this again. E theta will be given by this and E phi will be given by this. Similarly, your HR going to be 0. H theta and H phi can be derived using corresponding component of E phi and E theta using the definition which we know that in the far field, when we have a plane waves, basically the ratio of electric field and magnetic field will be equal to intrinsic impedance of the media. Okay, that is nothing but this one. However, when we define the H field, corresponding H field using this ratio, we have to keep in mind that we have to follow the Poynting theorem. So when we take E and H component, we have to take those E and H component in such a way that when we take a right hand rule using Poynting theorem, E cross H should point your power density should be directed in the desired direction. So basically here we want a radiation in the radial direction, positive R direction. So for that you have to take a ratio of if you take a ratio of, let's say, E theta and H phi, that will give you theta cross phi will give you positive R. And if you take E phi cross H theta, that will be directed in the negative R direction. So in order to compensate for that opposite direction, you have to add this negative sign in front of that. So you have to keep in mind that whatever components you are taking, E theta or E phi and H theta and H phi, you have to keep in mind that Poynting theorem, using Poynting theorem, basically your scattered power density should be directed in a correct direction. Okay, so when we do this, basically this will be your expression for E theta H phi and H theta H phi. Now based on that, again this is our geometry. What we are going to do is we will consider two particular planes. One is when our phi s is equal to pi by 2, that is going to be what? That is going to be YZ plane. Okay, and that is nothing but our plane of incidence, or you can also call that as a principal plane, one of the principal plane, and that is phi s equals to pi by 2. The other principal plane is phi s equals to 0. Also, since our E vector for this particular polarization, E vector is also parallel to your YZ plane, plane of incidence, that phi s equals to pi by 2 plane, then this plane is also called E plane, because your E vector is parallel to this plane. So you can also call that plane as a E plane. Same thing for H plane, since your whatever the plane is orthogonal to your E plane is going to be H plane, or here also H vector is going to be parallel to your H vector is going to be parallel to this plane phi equals to 0. So when we apply that phi s equals to pi by 2, you will see that in that plane ER is already 0 and E phi is also going to be approaches to the 0. So you will only have E theta, and you can see that in E theta that this E theta component of electric field in the far field is going to vary with respect to theta s with a function, with a variation of a sinc function. You are having here a sinc function where you have a sine theta s minus sine theta I in the argument of that sinc function, right? Also, not only this sinc function, you also have cosine of theta s in the multiplication. So if we want to find the maximum of this scattered field in the far field, what we have to do is we have to find the maxima of this multiplication of two functions, cosine theta s and sine sinc function with the argument of beta b divided by 2 sine theta s minus sine theta I. Now We also saw similar thing when we discuss or derive the expression for the scattering from the strip, two-dimensional strip. And if you remember that for TE to Z polarization, in that case we had some slightly different coordinate system. Instead of X direction, we had a Z direction over there. Here we have that Z direction replaced by X direction. So if you remember, for TE to Z polarization, your maxima for your maxima predicted by this physical optics was not in the direction of conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law. Okay. However, for TM to Z polarization, again, if you remember, for TM to Z polarization, the maxima of your scattered field was directed right in the direction of conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law. So the same thing here we see that ideally using conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law, that you should have a maximum radiated or scattered field in the theta s equals to theta I. But that will happen only if you have a sinc function variation for your E theta s. Here you can see that in addition to that sinc function, in addition to this sinc function, okay, in addition to this sinc function, we also have cosine of theta s. And as a result of that, basically your maxima will be slightly away from your conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law. So that is the function for, that is the distribution for E theta. Similarly, in the other plane, H plane, when phi s equals to 0, when phi s is equals to 0, what happens is you have two sinc functions. This is a first sinc function and this is the another sinc function. Okay. So that is going to be your E phi component. And if we want to find a total E scattered field in the far field, then we will use this particular expression to find the total electric field magnitude. Why are we interested in the magnitude? Because in definition of the radar cross section, basically we use magnitude of E field or magnitude of H field, scattered and incident fields, right? We don't require vector. We don't care about the phase of these scattered fields. We care more about the magnitude. And this is the definition. That's what I was mentioning, that basically in the definition of radar cross section, we are interested in the magnitude of the scattered E field as well as incident E field. Or we can, if we are interested in using H field, then magnitude of scattered H field and magnitude of the incident H field. So using these fields, this distribution again, in the definition of RCS, if you remember, we are looking in the far field, R equals to infinite. And when we use these definitions, this will be your radar cross section using those two expressions, using these two expressions for E theta and E phi. This will be your radar cross section from the rectangular plate. And as you can see that basically we have a sinc function variation. Okay, we have a sinc function variation. Now, again, we will see in the following slides, basically the maximum RCS is going to be 4 pi times A times B divided by lambda whole square. So this is going to be your maximum value of RCS for monostatic case. We will see in the following slides. So again, your radar cross section in two principal planes. First, let's say phi s equals to pi by 2. Okay, that is basically nothing but your plane of incidence. This is going to be your expression for the RCS, bistatic RCS. And as I mentioned again, that you have two types of variations. One is a cosine of theta s and the other one is a sinc function with respect to theta s, right? And as a result of that, in order to find the maxima for this particular RCS, you have to use some kind of iterative process and need to find an optimum point where you will have a maximum of these two functions which are multiplied with each other. Also, for the backscattered field, that is nothing but phi s equals to phi I. That is, we are going to take 3 pi by 2, okay, and theta s equals to theta I. For that, this will be your expression for the backscattering RCS. That is nothing but the monostatic RCS. Now, again, this is a sinc function, right? So it is going to be maximum, okay, it is going to be maximum when this argument is going to be 0. Okay, beta b sine theta I is going to be 0. It will be maximum. So that means that theta I has to be 0. Okay, theta I has to go to 0. And same thing for cosine theta I. Again, that function will be 0 when theta I is going to be 0. So you can see that the maximum value for your monostatic RCS is going to be 4 pi times AB divided by lambda whole square, right? So this is going to be 1 when you will have maximum value theta I equals to 0. And same thing for this function, that sinc function is also going to go to approach to 1 value when the argument is very small, almost 0. In that case, basically your maximum monostatic RCS is going to be given by this expression, remaining expression, that is 4 pi times A by B over lambda whole square. And again, if you remember, we saw the same expression, similar expression even for the strip, right? Even for the strip, we had something similar, that you will see maximum RCS when your waves are coming normally, okay, to the when the waves are impinging from the normal direction of the surface. And the reason we explained at that time that what happens is, if you come from the normal, if you observe from the normal direction, what will happen is you will see a maximum physical area of the plate. So you will have a maximum effective area, which is basically scattering in that direction. If we look from the oblique direction, if we are observing from the oblique direction, what will happen? Basically, you will have some projection of your area directed in this direction, so in the oblique direction. So let me just draw here for the clarification. So this is your plate. Okay, now let's say if we are in the first case, when we are observing from here, from the top, let's say this is our observer's eye. Okay, so in that case, what will happen? Then in that case, what will happen, that you will see entire cross-sectional area of this plate. Okay, that is a maximum area you can get. Okay, that's why you will see a maximum RCS or maximum scattered field in that direction. Now let's say, instead of looking from the normal direction, if we, let's say, look at this plate from this direction, from the oblique incidence, in that case, what will happen, you can draw a projection in this direction, and this will be your effective area. So now that effective area has reduced down to this particular value, right? So it is going to be multiplied by cosine theta. So that's what, when we are looking from the oblique direction, you will have a lower values of RCS compared to RCS value from the normal direction. Again, the same thing, that maximum will occur when theta s equals to theta I. And also this is basically, we are talking about the TE2X polarization. Why? When B is much greater than lambda. So when the dimension, this dimension, okay, when this particular dimension is much larger than lambda, then what will happen is that this sinc variation, because that B is also in the argument, beta B times sine theta s plus or minus sine theta I. So in this expression, you can see that beta B is nothing but, so you can write that beta as 2 pi over lambda, right? So 2 pi, if I write here 2 pi by lambda, okay, that is beta, and this is B. Also we have this extra 2 here, right? So that will be here. So that 2 will cancel each other out. So you will have pi times B by lambda. So you can see that if this ratio B by lambda is much large, then basically you will have a sinc function which is varying very fast compared to your cosine of theta s. So if your argument for sinc function is much larger, that is going to happen when we have this condition, B is much greater than lambda, or this ratio B by lambda is much larger. In that case, you will have this function which is varying much faster. This sinc function is varying much faster than the other function cosine theta s. So you can consider that cosine theta is almost like a constant, and as a result of that, the maxima will occur when this argument is going to be 0, and that will be when theta s is going to be equals to theta I. So that's why if your plate is much larger in that direction, in the y direction, so b dimension is much larger than lambda, then in that case your RCS is going to be, RCS of your rectangular plate is going to be maximum in the conventional specular direction. It is going to approach, or it is going to go towards that conventional specular direction, and that maximum RCS is given by this expression. Again, as I mentioned, you will have this cosine theta I variation for that RCS, and that maxima will occur when we are coming from the normal direction and observing in the normal direction, right? If we are coming in the oblique direction, then you will have to multiply by cosine theta I, and that is nothing but this projection which I just explained, that you will have extra projection that will deteriorate your value for the RCS or even the scattered field. Also, here we are discussing like a PEC structure. Okay, now PEC structure usually have like a reflection coefficient, you know that it is going to be -1, right? But there are like in practice you will have, let's say when we discuss like meta surfaces or some other complex surfaces, okay, in that case there is a high probability that your theta component can get converted to phi component, as well as your phi component get converted to theta component in the scattered field. So basically those component conversion of components is nothing but it is producing cross polarization. So you can also define a scattering matrix. Okay, you can define a scattering matrix something like this, that your E theta scattered, okay, and here E phi scattered. So this is a column vector, okay, is equals to, or it is proportional to, let's say it is proportional to some matrix, okay, some matrix 2 by 2 matrix. This 2 by 2 matrix is nothing but square root of sigma theta theta, okay, so subscript is theta theta. Also this component is going to be something like sigma, we will call this as a, let's say, phi theta, okay. Then this another component is going to be sigma square root of sigma theta phi, okay, theta phi. And the last component of this matrix will be square root of sigma phi phi, okay. So you will have some matrix like this, and then that matrix is nothing but multiplied by your original electric field column vector, that is E theta I, okay, this is going to be E theta I, and this is going to be E phi I. So what we are saying is your E theta S is a summation of two components. E scattered field in the theta direction is a summation of two components. One is going to be square root of theta theta times E theta I, okay, that is nothing but a copole component, and it will also have another component, that is square root of sigma phi theta times E theta, or sorry, E phi I, okay. So what I am trying to say is we will have two components, okay. First component is going to be this component, okay, that is going to be multiplied with this one, and the second component is going to be this component, which is nothing but multiplied by this component, right? When we do this matrix multiplication, that's how you multiply, and that will this summation of these two components will give rise to this will give rise to this first component of E theta S, right? So this component, okay, is nothing but a copole, because incident field is also having theta component and your scattered field is also having a theta component, that is a copole. And this component, which is highlighted by yellow highlighter, is nothing but a cross pole, because your incident field is having a phi component but it is producing a theta component. And same thing you can also write for the phi component, that E phi S is proportional to square root of sigma theta phi times E theta I plus square root of sigma. Let me just have a pointer. So this E phi S is proportional to square root of sigma theta phi times E theta I plus square root of sigma phi times E phi I. So first component, that square root of sigma theta phi, is going to be your cross pole component, and this second component is going to be your copole component. So in general, what I'm trying to say is you will not only have one particular component for your sigma RCS. In general, when you have like a complex surface, basically it will have some, let's say, polarization conversion from, let's say, parallel to perpendicular, or perpendicular to parallel, or something like theta will be converted to phi, or phi will be converted to theta. Okay, and that will be called like a cross pole, if you have that kind of conversion from theta to phi or phi to theta. And if you have from theta to theta or phi to phi, that is nothing but nothing but a copole. So again, the same thing it is explaining here, that when you have b much greater than lambda, then basically your maxima of that RCS or scattered E field is going to be approaching towards the conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law of reflection. And also when we do Tm to x, we will show in the coming slides that when we consider Tm to x, we don't really have to do this kind of approximation. You will always have a maxima in the conventional specular direction predicted by Snell's law, regardless of your dimension for the B. Regardless how large your rectangular plate is, you will always have a maxima in the conventional specular direction. So as you can see in this plot, using physical optics approximation, for the A and B equals to phi lambda, so for these dimensions of your plate, and when theta I equals to 30 degree, so you are coming at the theta I equals to 30 degree somewhere here. Okay, so when you incident your plane waves in the theta I equals to 30 degree and phi I equals to 270 degree. So this first half region is nothing but phi I equals to 270, and the other half is basically 90 degree. Phi equals to 90 degree. So you will see that when we incident phi I equals to 270 and theta I equals to 30 degree, you will see your maxima should be somewhere here, where phi equals to 30 degree and theta equals to phi equals to 90 degree and theta is equals to somewhere around 30 degree. And you can see that there is some minute difference. You can see that your RCS, okay, they are not on top of each other for both the polarization Tm2x and Te2x. And reason is your Tm2x is right in the conventional specular direction. However, your Te2x maxima is not in the conventional specular direction, is slightly offsetted or displaced from the conventional specular direction. You can also see the difference between those two fields here in the non-specular direction towards the grazing angle, towards the edges in the grazing angle direction. You can see that basically those fields are not they are not equal to each other, right? There is a lot of difference between them. Again, this shows the that cosine theta s variation. In one particular expression you have cosine theta I, in the other one you have cosine phi s, and as a result of that variation or that difference in the expression, you see this difference. Now again, this is for monostatic, and you can see that for monostatic you get this same pattern for Te2x and Tm2x, right, for both. And again, we are using A equals to B equals to phi lambda dimension for your rectangular plate, and you see that your maxima is occurring when theta I is equals to theta s equals to 0 degree. So again, from the normal direction, right? If you remember, and that maxima will be how much? That maxima will have a value of 4 pi times area of your plate, that is in our case small a times small b, divided by lambda whole square, right? So that was the expression, right? We just saw that expression here. So this is going to be your maxima, right? This expression is going to be your maxima, correct? Value of your maxima, sorry. Now again, we derive the expression for T to X, and we just showed you the result for the Tm to X. Now let's go through the procedure for the Tm to X. We are not going to go in the details, but you can go through by yourself, right? So it's the same procedure, just the expression for your incident fields are going to be slightly different. So now your HI field is parallel to YZ plane. Okay, HI is parallel to YZ plane, or in other words, your EI is parallel to X direction or perpendicular to plane of incidence, and that's why this polarization can also be named as, or is called as, perpendicular polarization. Also, since your H vector is parallel to your YZ plane, or in other words, H vector is perpendicular to X direction, we can also call this as a TM to X polarization. Okay, so TM to X polarization is called perpendicular polarization in our case for a given plane of incidence. Also remember, for T to X polarization, we call that in optics, we call that as a hard polarization. Here this TM to X polarization is called soft polarization. Again, this comes from optics and from diffraction theory terminologies. Okay, terminologies or the way conventions we use or define this polarization in optics. T to X is going to be hard polarization, TM to X is going to be soft polarization. And again, in the book, in the textbook by Professor Balanis, example 11.3 is nothing but is asking you to derive the expression for the scattered field and radar cross section for the TM to X polarization for the rectangular plate. So again, using the same method or process, we are going to derive or we are going to write down the expression for EI and HI. Okay, this should be very straightforward now. We have been doing this for 4 months now, right? So this will be expression for EI and HI. Now using physical optics approximation, we just use that for T to X. This will be your JS, surface current density, equivalent surface current density on your rectangular plate. And from that we see that now your surface current density is directed in the X direction. Previously it was directed in the Y direction. Now it is directed in the X direction. And your JY and JZ component are 0. Also, your magnetic current densities are 0. So again, your integral components L theta and L phi is going to be, both those components are going to be 0. And you will only have n theta and n phi component. Those two integrals will be non-zero. So let's go through that. So this is a two, again, side view of the same geometry. So as I mentioned, you will have only two components, n theta and n phi. So this is the expression for or integral for n theta, and we are going to use the same same definition for ds prime, that is going to be dx prime times dy prime, and even for this particular e to the power j beta r prime cosine psi, it is going to be nothing but this particular definition. Okay, so x prime sine theta s cosine phi s plus y prime sine theta s sine phi s, that is going to be j beta r cosine psi. Now when we use those definitions, basically we come up with this expression for n theta, and you can see that again you will have sinc function sinc x and sinc y, and where your x and y is given by these two expressions respectively. Similarly, your n phi is derived by this defined by this integral, surface integral, and by when we do that, when we go through that derivation, you will get this final expression for your n phi. Again, using those two integral those two expressions for n theta and n phi, we can write down that in the far field ER and HR is going to be 0 for the scattered field, and E theta and E phi are given by this, and from that H phi from E theta and H theta from E phi are given by these expressions. And this is the geometry we are using, side view of the same geometry. Okay, so you can see that this will be your expression for your scattered E field. Okay, E phi field in the principal H plane, that is phi s equals to pi by 2. Okay, and now remember, this particular plane is now called H plane. Why? Because your H plane is parallel to phi s equals to pi by 2. Previously phi s equals to pi by 2, that is nothing but yz plane is parallel to your E vector, or your E vector was parallel to yz plane. Actually I should say the other way around, right? So E vector was parallel to yz plane, or phi s equals to pi by 2. That's why we call that plane as a E plane. Here in our case, since E vector is directed in the X direction, not in the yz plane, right? That's why this particular plane phi s equals to pi by 2 is now H plane. So that is H plane, and you can see that in that H plane, principal plane, instead of cosine of theta I, now we have cosine of theta, sorry, instead of cosine of theta s, now we have a variation of cosine theta I. So now for a given angle of incidence, that is theta I, let's say equals to 30 degree, this cosine theta I is nothing but a constant. So you only have this sinc function, okay, with respect to which your E phi s, scattered E field, is going to vary as a function of theta s. So in this particular polarization Tm to x, your maxima will occur when sinc function will have its maxima, and sinc function is going to have its maxima when the argument is going to be 0, and that argument is going to be 0 when theta s equals to theta I, right? When theta s equals to theta I, for that particular condition, your sinc function is going to have maximum value, and consequently your scattered field and RCS are going to have maximum value. So this will be your biostatic RCS, again in the principal plane, that is H plane, phi s equals to pi by 2. And as you can see, again maxima will occur now exactly at theta s equals to theta I. In contrast to TE to X or parallel polarization, here for perpendicular polarization or TM to X polarization, you have maxima right in the conventional specular direction. Okay, and this will be expression of your maximum RCS. And as you can see that again, when theta I is going to be 0, that is basically from the normal incidence, it is going to have its maximum value, that is going to be 4 pi times capital A divided by lambda whole square, where capital A is nothing but the physical area of your rectangular plate. Okay, so you will have effective area maximum when you are coming from the normal direction. You are incidenting or impinging your waves from the normal direction, normal incidence. So that is that's what he is showing here, right? So sigma 3d equals to 4 pi times capital A divided by lambda whole square. And for oblique incidence, you are going to have that cosine theta I extra multiplication factor due to that projection. From that physical interpretation, we saw that you have that projection angle. As a result of that, you will have that cosine theta I. Now, same procedure one can follow for circular plate. So for circular plate, what we are going to have, if you remember last time or even lecture before that, if you remember that when we started discussing scattering, we discussed that for certain geometries, especially for circular apertures or circular plate, sometimes it is better to have like a hybrid method, where what we do is your current densities are in, let's say, Cartesian coordinate system, rectangular coordinate system. However, your integration which you are doing is going to be in cylindrical coordinate system. So you are going to have integration in the rho direction, in the phi direction, in the z direction. However, your surface current densities are going to be defined in x, y, z component, right? So the same hybrid method we have to use here. It will help us because your incident waves are defined, plane waves are defined in the Cartesian coordinate system or rectangular coordinate system. So you have TE to X or TM to X. So your E vector is either in the X direction or your H vector is in the X direction, right? Something vice versa, right? So based on that, your incident waves are vectors are defined in the rectangular coordinate system. So based on that, even when we define the surface current density, equivalent surface current density using physical optics, it is going to be in Cartesian coordinate or rectangular coordinate system, right? However, our geometry is circularly symmetric, so it is easier to integrate these current densities in the circular coordinate system, or yes, circular coordinate system. So that's what we do. We use that hybrid method where your current densities, equivalent current densities are defined in the XYZ components, and your integration is going to be in rho, phi, and z component. And when we do that, this will be your equation for the maximum RCS for the circular plate using physical optics. And again, you see that 4 pi times pi small a square, where a small a is nothing but the radius of this circular plate. So pi small a square is nothing but capital A, physical area of your circular plate. And also again, monostatic RCS is going to be maximum when theta s is going to be equals to theta I. That is basically under the normal incidence. So when you have a normal incidence, what will happen is this theta I is going to be 0. Okay, and again, similar to sinc function, which is sinc function is a ratio of sine x by x, right? Sine x by x. Here we have something similar, which is a ratio of Bessel function and its argument. So here we have something like a Bessel function of first order, j1 of x, right? X is the argument, and divide by x. So this is something similar to sine x by x. So for sine x by x, for sinc function, the maximum value occurs when the argument is 0. Okay, when it approaches 0, and that is its maximum value is 1. Here, this value for this function, this ratio is approaches 1 by 2 when x is very small. Okay, so over there sinc function approaches 1. Here this ratio of Bessel functions with argument x and the divided by that argument x approaches 1 by 2 when x equals to 0, or it approaches 0. So for so small arguments, right? Now that 1 by 2 will get multiplied with this 2. Okay, so basically this whatever expression we have in this inside this square bracket is going to have a 1 value, something similar to sinc function, right? So this will be 1, okay, when the theta I is going to be 0. And as a result of that, again you will have this particular as a monostatic RCS, or maximum for the monostatic RCS, right? Sigma maximum equals to 4 pi times pi a square divided by lambda whole square times cosine theta whole square, right? Now again, if theta I equals to 0, that is normal incidence, this function is also going to be 1. Okay, so for that you can see that again this is similar to rectangular plate, that your maximum monostatic RCS is going to be equals to 4 pi times physical area of that circular plate divided by lambda whole square. And this is the physical optics, this is the RCS predicted by physical optics approximation, and you can see that you have maxima in the normal direction, that is theta I equals to theta s equals to 0 degree. So this one is for a equals to lambda, and when you have a equals to phi lambda, you see that value is much higher, as well as you have much more variations, right? Now this is the first topic which we discussed. Now let's go to the second topic of this lecture, that is scattering by the circular cylinder. Okay, now for that what we are going to do is, this is our geometry. So our circular cylinder is basically having a axis is basically located along the x-axis. Okay, so axis of rotation is basically z-axis. Okay, and we are going to have two type of polarization, TE to Z and TM to Z. So when we have TE to Z polarization, that means your E vector is going to be in the XY plane. Okay, it's perpendicular to Z direction. That means your E vector is going to be in the XY plane, right? and the other polarization is going to be TM to Z polarization. In that case, your E vector is going to be along Z direction and H vector is going to be in the XY plane or parallel to XY plane. Now, if you remember, in the last lecture, I mentioned something that when we use physical optics approximation for this circular geometry or circular cylinder, what happens is it assumes that your current is going to be only on the front side of the cylinder. It is going to be only exciting equivalent current density on the front side of your cylindrical surface. So on this shadow side, let me highlight with some other color. So on this side, on the shadow side here, okay, on this side, the current is going to be, surface current is going to be 0 using physical optics approximation. And I made a small mistake towards the end of the last lecture. Let me just rectify that. In the last lecture, I made a mistake that I will show you in the coming slides. I will come back to that mistake and basically clarify what mistake I made in the last lecture. So what happens is basically on the shadow region, we don't have any kind of surface current density, okay? And that's what he is showing here. So basically you will have surface current density on only this portion, only here in this front portion, okay? In this front portion only you will have a surface current density. And that is here you can see that this using physical optics, your J phi, this J phi is nothing but this rectangular window, and that is from phi equals to 90 to phi equals to 270 degree. So if you go back here from x axis, we are defining this phi. So that is from here phi equals to 90 to phi equals to 270. In this front side only you will have a equivalent surface current density using physical optics approximation. Now what will happen, you might think that physical optics, since it does not assume any current on the back side or on the shadow side, it will not give a correct RCS value, right? That would you intuitively you would think that it is going to be inaccurate on the shadow side. Its prediction are not going to be accurate in the shadow direction or the forward direction, okay? Then you are wrong. Why? Let me show you the result. So this is the result you are having, okay? And this is where I made a mistake last time towards the end of the lecture, that basically, let me let me just have the highlighter change. Let me just change the color. So this is the direction at phi equals to 0 degree or phi equals to 360 degree. That is nothing but this direction on the shadow side. So shadow side is nothing but from phi equals to 0 to 90 degree. That is, let me highlight with some other color. So let's highlight the shadow region with blue color. So that is from here to here, okay? 0 to 90 degree is the shadow region, and also again from 270 to 360 degree, okay? So this is the shadow region ideally, and you can see that in that region from 0 to 90 degree, okay, and from 270 to 360 degree, that is this region. You can see that in the forward direction, surprisingly, in this region, if you look at the field distribution in this region, okay, surprisingly, your physical optics gives a very good accurate results when we compare that with the modal solution, or even in the, if we compare it with the integral equation methods. Either it is electric field integral equation or magnetic field integral equation. You can see that it gives you very accurate answer in the forward direction, that is a shadow region, okay? And someone might think that why do you have such a high RCS? Why do you have such a high radar cross section or scattering width in the forward direction? That's where you have a shadow, okay? That means you don't have any fields in the forward direction. then how come you have such a high RCS in the forward direction? It has to be incorrect, right? No, it is correct. Why? Okay, let me just explain why it is correct. So when we say we create a shadow in the forward direction behind the object, we create a shadow. When we say that, what do we mean by shadow is your total E field, which is a summation. Let's say E total, that is ET equals to, it's a summation of vector EI incident field, okay, plus, and these are vectors, okay, these are the vectors, plus the scattered field E scattered in the forward direction. So your total field in any region, in any observation region, is going to be summation of two components. First is going to be your incident field, and the second is going to be your scattered field. Now in the forward direction, when we create a shadow, that means this E total must go to 0. Okay, your total field should go to 0. That means that your ES, this ES is nothing but, you can write that ES, or let me just erase and write here only, that your ES is going to be, when this E total is equals to 0, your, let me just write down here, that ES component is going to be equal to negative of EI. So you can see that actually your scattered field is going to be equal to your incident field in the forward direction, where you are creating a shadow. That means when we define the radar cross section, what is the definition of radar cross section? If you remember, it's a definition given by something like a ratio of scattered field. So we take a magnitude of the scattered E field and also magnitude of the incident E field, right? So we take a magnitude of these two, and that will give us the radar cross section or scattering width, right? So that means this ratio is going to be maximum. That ratio is going to be 1 in the forward direction. So where you are creating a shadow, surprisingly, you will have a maximum radar cross section. Okay, that's why. So that's why it is important. So here you should have this clear idea about what is the difference between stealth technology and invisibility. Okay, in the stealth technology, you only get rid of this scattered field. You try to reduce your radar cross section. Okay, and how will you reduce your radar cross section? By getting rid of the scattered field. That will make your radar cross section go to 0, okay, from this definition. And that is what you try to do in the stealth technology. However, in the invisibility, if you want to make an object invisible, then you have to get rid of your shadow. How will you get rid of shadow? In order to get rid of that shadow, basically you have to make this E total. So if you want to get rid of that shadow, what you have to do is you have to make your E total equals to EI. Okay, and that will only happen when you will have ES equals to 0. Okay, so there are two different things which we are trying to do. You need to understand this. Okay, what we are trying to do is in the forward direction, we are trying to also get rid of that shadow. We are trying to reduce the shadow. However, when we talk about the radar cross section, basically a radar cross section is going to be high in the shadow, even though your total E field is going to be 0 in the forward direction. Okay, so this concept you have to keep in your mind when we discuss about stealth or invisibility. In invisibility, basically you also get rid of the shadow. In the stealth, usually you don't care about the forward scattering. Usually you don't care about the forward scattering. You usually don't care about this region. Usually when we discuss about the radar cross section, usually we talk about the back scattering, okay, on the back side. So from where the waves are coming. So usually when we are trying to reduce RCS, we try to reduce RCS in this region, okay. Okay, that is going to be something for the stealth. However, if you have, let's say, forward scattering radar, or forward scattering radar meaning your transmitter is located here, okay, and your receiver is located in the forward direction behind the your object, behind the scatterer, then in that case you will also have to get rid of the shadow, because even shadow is shadow also shows the presence of some object, right? If you see some kind of shadow, that means there has to be some kind of object, right? That's why you have shadow. So in order to make that object invisible or transparent, you have to get rid of that shadow. Anyways, so what we are going to do is, in this topic, we are going to consider, so that's what I made a mistake. I think last time when we were discussing about towards the end, I was going through this topic quickly, and in that basically last 1 minute, when we were wrapping up our topic, I think I made a mistake that I said that this is a backscattering. It is not a backscattering, it is a forward scattering, okay. It is at phi equals to 0 and phi equals to 360 degree, that is on the forward side, not on the backward side, okay. So it's not a back scattering, it's a forward scattering. Anyways, so your E total is going to be, as I mentioned, E total is going to be summation of EI and E scattering, incident E field and scattering scattered E field. Now we are going to consider two type of sources. Even last time we saw two type of sources, and we derive some expression for the line sources. If you remember, we derive expression for the line sources. We will go through that again, so that you, if you have forgotten, then we will go through that quickly. And the second topic is going to be plane wave. So you might think that why do we need to go through the derivation, or what are we going to do for the plane waves? We already know, we already use plane waves for rectangular plate or strip type of structure, and you might be thinking like it's very simple, right? To define plane wave is a very simple thing. Now here the challenge is that your plane waves are defined in the rectangular coordinate system. However, our scattering object has a cylindrical circular symmetry. So you are going to use a cylindrical coordinate system. It is easier for us to derive scattering from cylindrical structure with a circular cylindrical coordinate system. And for that, you have to convert your incident field, which is a plane wave, to the cylindrical components. You have to write those incident fields in terms of E phi, E rho, and EZ component. So that's what we are going to do. We are going to convert those plane wave expressions which are in rectangular coordinates. We are going to convert those into cylindrical coordinates. So again, we will start with the line source. So if you remember, for the line source, we had two types of line source. One which is actually placed on the origin, that is along the Z axis, and the second was slightly offsetted or displaced from the Z direction or Z axis, right? So this is the first case where your line source is on top of your Z axis, and second case basically where your line source is slightly displaced. Still it is parallel to Z axis but slightly displaced with respect to Z axis. So first of all, for electrical line source, so if you remember, when you have that electrical line source going through the origin, what happens is your EZ is given by this one for electrical line source, and then you will have H phi component. Remember, from Ampere's law you can also derive that, right? So this is going to be your equations. And again, for radiated fields, if you remember, basically we are going to have Hankel functions. We are going to have Hankel function of second kind. That is basically your waves are radiating away, scattering away in the radial direction from the origin. Now when those sources are displaced, basically when rho prime is not equals to 0, okay, when they are displaced from the z axis but still they are parallel to z axis, then you simply change this beta rho by this expression in the argument of the Hankel function beta rho minus rho prime, right? That rho prime is nothing but non-zero. Previously it was 0, now for the generalized case it's non-zero. So now you have beta rho minus rho prime. And we also saw that for the far field we can reduce this expression using the law of cosine. So using law of cosine in the far field, we can reduce that expression for capital R to this one, okay? And when we do that, basically what will happen geometrically, your capital R is parallel to rho, okay? And as a result of that, you will get this particular expression, okay, for this additional distance. And what will happen is, if you look at this expression, basically what happens is easy component remains easy. However, for h phi component, initially when you have a line source on the origin, we had proper phi component, right? Proper cylindrical component, phi component. However, when we displace, what happens is instead of phi component, now we have psi component. We don't know the definition of that psi. We don't have well-defined angle psi, and as a result of that, it's kind of not a preferred way of denoting or expressing your components. You would like to have your E and H field in terms of coordinate components. So what is the alternate method? So for alternate method, what we do is we apply that non-zero rho prime in the vector potential A itself. When we apply that in vector potential itself and apply this again, capital R equals to this one, and from that vector potential, using the definition of E and H, we can write that Ez equals to this one. We derive this, right? We have gone through this derivation in the last lecture, and this will be your final expression for Ez. Again, in the first method also, we did not have any problem with the Ez. The problem was with the H psi, because instead of phi, now you had some random angle psi. Now, because we use this transformation in the vector potential A itself, as a result of that, what will happen? You will have proper two components, H phi and H rho, distinct two components in the cylindrical coordinate system. And that's why this will be your first component H rho, and this will be your component for H phi. So now you have two separate components in the cylindrical coordinate system. That's why we prefer this coordinate over this method over the first method. Now for the magnetic line source, it will be the other way around. You can also use duality theorem, right? So whatever was for H phi, now that will become E phi, and whatever you had for Ez will become Hz. So this is the expression when your magnetic line source is on the origin, going through the origin. Now again, if you don't have that line source at the origin, then what will happen? We had that issue, right? That your E component now, instead of E phi, it has a E psi component, right? And we don't know, we haven't a well-defined definition for the psi component or psi angle. And now again, we don't have any issues with Hz. Similar to Ez, now for magnetic line source, we have only one component, Hz. We don't have any issue. Now, again, for the far field, using a law of cosine, you can reduce that capital R magnitude to this particular expression. We are not going to go through that because your R is basically parallel to rho. That's why basically you can reduce that expression to this one. And what we are going to do is that in the far field, okay, in the far field, your beta rho is going to be very large. And we know that for the large argument, the asymptotic expression for Hankel function of second kind is nothing but something in the exponential form, right? So we apply that exponential form for both component E and H in the far field, okay? And that will give us this expression for Hz. Again, as I mentioned, we will have issue with the psi component. So what is the alternate method? Alternate method is apply that transformation directly to your vector potential F. Okay, you apply that transformation here only, rho minus rho prime. And when we do that, now we will have two components for the H field, E field. Here already H field has one component Hz. Now for E field, now we will have two separate components, E rho and E phi. Instead of E psi, now we have two separate components, E rho and E phi. And using that definition, this will be your final expression for E rho. This will be expression for your E phi. Now, the third part of this lecture is, as I mentioned, we are going to convert our plane wave into cylindrical components. So definitely we are going to derive this, or we are going to do the transformation from rectangular coordinates to cylindrical coordinates for the plane wave. So let's take a very simple example of a plane wave, where your plane waves are basically propagating in the x direction. So when your waves are going in the x direction, what will happen? You can write that expression by e to the power minus j times beta, which is your basically propagation constant, right, times x, right, beta x. And again, remember, this denotes or this particular expression represents a propagation in positive x direction only when we assume e to the power positive j omega t time convention. So you have to keep always this in mind. Throughout this course, we are always using time convention e to the power positive j times omega t. Okay, with this time convention, e to the power minus j beta x is representing a wave propagation in the positive x direction. Again, this is going to be our geometry. Okay, so what will happen? You are not going to have your line source, okay, or any source on the origin. So you might have your source slightly offsetted from the origin of your coordinate system. Okay, we will go through that in the coming slides. But basically, you have these plane waves coming in the x direction, positive x direction, and now this is your observation point directed in the rho direction and phi direction with some phi angle and rho radial distance. Also, your cylinder has a dimension rho equals to a. Small a is the radial dimension of your cylinder with a circular symmetry. So, as I mentioned, for this kind of waves which are propagating in x direction, we can write E vector like this. So E vector is directed in z direction, Ez, and it is propagating, waves are propagating in the positive x direction. Now, what we are going to do is this x, okay, this x can be written as rho times cosine phi. So if we take a projection of this here, okay, then this x, okay, x distance is going to be something like a rho times cosine phi, right? It's a very simple. So we take a projection in the x direction, and we can just substitute that x here, that is rho times cosine psi, rho times cosine phi. Now we can write, we can represent this e to the power minus j beta rho cosine phi as a summation of or infinite summation of cylindrical wave functions, where basically that cylindrical wave functions are Bessel functions. Okay, Bessel functions. Now you can have a Bessel function of first kind or Bessel function of second kind. However, we want our fields to be finite at rho equals to 0. At rho equals to 0 along the z-axis, we want the finite field distribution, finite field. That's why we are not going to use Bessel function of second kind. If you remember, Bessel function of second kind has a singularity. When the argument goes to 0, it has a singularity. So we are going to avoid, we are going to impose boundary condition that at rho equals to 0, basically that particular component will be 0, so that your yn of beta rho, that is a Bessel function of second kind, is going to be 0. So you will only have a Bessel function of first kind. And we can represent that e to the power minus j beta rho cosine phi equals to summation of infinite summation of this Bessel function of first kind times e to the power minus j and phi. Now this e to the power minus j and phi is coming due to the symmetry in the phi direction. Okay, symmetry in the phi direction or phi direction. That's why you are going to have that there. And also this is a Bessel function because we want to represent that in terms of cylindrical wave functions. Okay. Now here this multiplication coefficient an. Okay, this multiplication coefficient is given by this particular expression j to the power minus n. And now in the following slides we are going to derive this particular value. We are not going to go into each and every step in proper detail, but I will go through main important steps. Okay, and when we use this definition, your E vector is given by infinite summation of these Bessel functions, right? So that will be your transformation. Now in the following slides we are going to go through this particular derivation, that how do we come up with this value of an. Okay, we will go through this derivation, that how do we get an equals to j to the power minus n. So for that what we are going to do is to derive that amplitude coefficients, we are going to use orthogonality concept. Okay, so first step is going to be we are going to multiply both sides, left and right side, by e to the power minus jm phi. So when we do that, on the left hand side you will have additional this term e to the power jm phi, and here also you will have that e to the power minus jm phi. Okay, when we do that, what will happen is this is going to be same. Okay, this is going to be same, but what we can do is you can see that integration is happening with respect to phi. So what we can do is we can take this summation, okay, infinite summation outside this integration, outside this integration. Also we are integrating from 0 to 2 pi. Okay, we are integrating with respect to phi from 0 to 2 pi. So we can take this component outside phi direction because it's the orthogonal component, rho component. So we can take them outside. So when we do that, we have this integration e to the power minus j, e to the power j n minus m phi. Now this integration is a very well-known integration, and from orthogonality condition, we can say that this integration from 0 to 2 pi results into 2 pi. This integration will be 2 pi if n and m equals to each other. That is basically n equals to m, that is n minus m equals to 0. So 1 times d phi, if you integrate that, you will get a 2 pi. Now if n is not equals to m, and remember this n and m both are integers, so that is basically it will be multiple of phi e to the power j k phi, where k is some integer numbers. That means it is going to be e to the power let's say phi, or e to the power 2 phi, e to the power 3 phi, and that will basically, if you integrate over 2 pi, 0 to 2 pi, you know that integration, if you do integration of cosine function or sine function over the entire cycle 0 to 2 pi, they are going to be 0, right? They are going to be 0. So basically with this orthogonality condition, we are going to implement that here. Okay, in this right hand side, on the right hand side we are going to use that. So what will happen, that for n equals to m, when n is equals to m, you will have this integration equals to 2 pi, and for n not equals to m, for all these values from minus infinite to plus infinite, only when n is equals to m you will have some finite value, otherwise for other values of n it is going to be 0. It is going to be 0 since this integration is going to go to 0 when n is not equals to m. As a result of that, that summation will now reduce down to only one term when n equals to m. So this an will become am, this jn becomes jm. Okay, that's why this an becomes am, jn beta rho becomes jm beta rho, right? So and this 2 pi comes from the integration. So this is from this integration. Okay, and as a result of that So this 2 pi comes from this integration. Okay. And when we do that, we can show that basically this will be your right hand side. This will be your right hand side. Now, this will be your right hand side. Okay, this 11.49 is your right hand side. Now, on the left hand side, that is 11.50. This is your left hand side, right? So this is, again, let me just erase, clear out these things so it is clear to you. So now on the left hand side, we have this expression, right? So what we are going to do is, on the right hand side, using this integral, we are going to use this integral, and then we are going to equate this with this. We are going to equate this with this one. So when we do that, what we are going to do, that basically this is your left hand side, right? And we are going to use this integrations definition, that nothing but your z is this. Let me just show. This z is, this z is nothing but beta rho, right? If you go back here, that is beta rho. Also you have additional negative sign in front of that, right? And that's why when we look at this, when we try to write that here, what will happen is, here you have negative sign, instead of z you have beta rho. So what will happen, that z will become minus beta rho, here m will become minus m. So that n, this n, right, that capital sorry, plus small n will become minus m minus m. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to also use two additional identity for the Bessel function. That is, when you have a negative order. Okay, so negative order, when you have a Bessel function with a negative order, it can be related to a Bessel function with a positive order by this expression. So you simply multiply by minus 1 to the power m. Okay, same thing, if you have a Bessel function with a negative argument, again it can be related to Bessel function of the with the positive argument by simply multiply by minus 1 to the power m. So we will use these two identities, and when we use these two identities, we can write this left hand side equals to this one. Okay, this is going to be your left hand side. So this is your left hand side original, and we can write that left hand side equals to this one, 2 pi times j to power minus m j m beta rho. Okay, now what we will do is, we are going to equate this left hand side with this right hand side. So this is our right hand side. Again, let me just clear out this. So this is our right hand side, right? We just derived that on the previous slide. This is our right hand side, and we are going to equate that with this left hand side. Okay, when we do that, okay, when we equate these two with each other, okay, you will come up that am is nothing but j to the power minus m. So this is the value which we discussed in the previous slides. So this is going to be your solution. So an is going to be j to the power minus n, and that's what we derive, and by using that definition, this is going to be your electric field for the electrical line source. Okay, so this is going to be your sorry, I just made a mistake. So that is going to be not for electrical line source. This is going to be E field for your plane wave. Okay, this is going to be your field distribution for the plane wave. This plane wave we initially assume, and now we can rewrite that in terms of some infinite summation of the Bessel functions. Okay. Now what we are going to do is, we are going to consider two type of plane waves, TM to Z and TE to Z polarization, right? We are going to consider two type of polarization, TM to Z and TE to Z polarization. And for that, again, EZ is going to be given by this function, right? EZ is going to be given by infinite summation. That's what we derive. Now again, this is our plane wave which is propagating in positive x direction, and After that, let's say that we have a line source. We have now discussed the plane wave. Okay, now let's come back to the line source. Let's say if we have a line source which is displaced by some distance rho prime and some angle phi, right, in the phi prime and rho prime, that is a displacement in the cylindrical coordinate system. So this is the location of your line source. And why do we require that? Because what we are going to do is we are going to assume that we are going to have a cylinder on around z axis. So we are going to have a cylinder here located here as a scattering object. Okay, that's why we are going to have line source slightly displaced, and based on that we will solve this problem. So when we do that, that's what he is here showing, right? That your line source is here, right, displaced by rho prime distance, radial distance, and phi prime angle. Okay, and your cylinder has a radial dimension of small a, rho equals to small a. So what will happen, and this is your observation point or location of your observation point, and you can see that it is given by the unprimed coordinates, so rho and phi. So unprimed coordinates are representing the location of your observation point, and prime coordinates represents the location of your line source, that is rho prime and phi prime. Now, in order to go through this problem, to create a solution of this problem, first we need to build a solid foundation in terms of mathematics, and for that we are going to go through some theorems which are going to be required in order to derive the solution for this problem. So first theorem is addition theorem for the Hankel function. Now what is the addition theorem of the Hankel function? So here you can see that this is our geometry, right? So now we have already discussed the plane wave. Now again we are focusing on the line source. Now here we are saying that our line source is located at some rho prime radial distance and phi prime angular distance. Okay, now, or angular direction. Okay, now what will happen is we can divide this observation region, this observation entire region around cylinder, in two regions. We can divide that into two parts, two regions. One is when this basically we can create a cylinder around your original cylindrical structure, where the radial distance is nothing but rho equals to rho prime. Okay, when radial distance is rho equals to rho prime. Okay, so that cylinder, okay, that cylinder, this is a cylinder very awfully drawn by me. Okay, this is not a proper cylinder, but what I was trying to draw was cylinder. This is, assume that this is a cylinder. Okay, even though it doesn't look like a cylinder. Anyways, so that is going to be your region 1. Okay, this is going to be region 1, and then whatever is remaining is going to be region 2. I think there is a figure of that. So yeah, this is what I was talking about, right? So this is that boundary at rho equals to rho prime. So when rho is less than rho prime, okay, that is a region 1. Okay, and then when the rho is greater than rho prime, okay, that is a region 2. So we can divide our observation area or region in two regions, region 1 and region 2, based on relative distance or dimensions of rho and rho prime. Now, what are we going to do is, basically, we know that we have derived that what would be expression for the line source, the electrical line source, in terms of Hankel function. We have derived that, right? So when we have a line source, electrical line source slightly displaced from the z-axis, then we know that this is the expression for the EZ. And we know that Hankel function of the second kind, and in the argument you will have rho minus rho prime, correct? Now what are we going to do is, in that Hankel function of second kind, this is going to be your basically using that laws of cosine or trigonometry. you can write that rho minus rho prime is given by this one, right? Capital R is given by this expression. Now, that Hankel function of a second kind represents two type. It should be representing a two type of solution, right? Let's say that when we are looking into this first region, we are observing in the first region when the rho is smaller than rho prime in this region, shaded region, what will happen is basically there will be some waves which are going to, there will be some waves here in this first region which are going to be coming inside, coming towards the origin of your coordinate system, towards the z-axis from the line source. So line source is radiating some fields, right? Let me just draw. So line source, this line source is radiating some fields, right? So basically there will be some component which are basically coming inward towards the z-axis, right? So for that, usually we have some kind of traveling wave, right? Now what will happen, because of this scatterer, there will be some waves which are going to be scattered back and they are going to get radiated away from the z-axis. So they are going to move away in the radial direction after the scattering. So there will be some scattered fields which will be like this, going outward, right? So we know that if we have waves which are going in both directions, like going back and forth in certain region, it will create some kind of standing wave pattern, right? And for that kind of solutions, again, if you remember that for chapter 9, when we discuss cylindrical waveguide with a circular cross section, the guided waves are basically represented by Bessel function, right? If you remember, we define that using a Bessel function. So that is what we have here in this first region. This is our first region. You expect that, let me just clear out this slide. You expect that in this first region, your function should have a Bessel function. So we are going to have infinite summation of Bessel function, let's say. Also, we need to keep in our mind that now we don't only have source, okay? Let me just also erase this. So as I mentioned, we are going to have waves which are going to go back and forth, right? Now we need to think about this, that we don't only have observer, we also have a source as well. So there are two type of coordinates, rho as well as rho prime, phi as well as phi prime, okay? So we saw that in this region, when rho is smaller than rho prime, when you are observing inside the region 1, in that case we say that you will have some kind of Bessel function, okay, because waves are bouncing back and forth in that region. However, we also have a source, right? We have also some source, and to have that presence of source, there should be some function, right? Ideally there should be some function which is also defining the location of the source. So let's assume that that function is given by this f of b rho prime. We don't know that function, okay? We don't know what is that function is, okay? Now for the second region, let's look at the second region when rho is greater than rho prime. So again, in this region, what will happen? Okay, in this region, what will happen? That if you look at the waves which are basically radiated by your source, line source, it's going to be go like this. Mostly in the second region, waves are going to be go outward, right? Waves are going to be going outward, something like this. If you look at this second region, okay, don't look at this first region, okay? If we ignore the first region, all the waves are going to be going outward, right, from that source. So that means we are going to have only waves which are going to be, and also not only the waves from the line source, also this scatterer also is also going to have some waves which are going to go outward only, right? So in this problem, okay, in this problem, in the second region, basically you are only going to have a traveling waves. You are only going to have a traveling waves which are basically going outward. Now that waves, those kind of waves, we know that if you remember when we discussed something like dielectric resonating antenna, right? If you remember that in radial direction, if you have something waves which are traveling in the outward direction, in the outward radially, then we use Hankel function, right? So intuitively, you would like to have Hankel function of a second kind, right? Second kind, not first kind. First kind represents a waves which are which are incoming waves. Here we want waves which are traveling away from your origin. So it is going to be Hankel function of second kind. Also, same thing for even first expression, we have only Bessel function of first kind. Why are we not using Bessel function of second kind? The reason is, if you use the Bessel function of second kind, then we know that at the origin, when the rho equals to 0, right, at the origin, at the z-axis, it has a singularity. So we don't want that singularity, so we get rid of that. Okay. Similarly, we get rid of the Hankel function of the first kind for this expression in the second region. So again, in the second region, we know that we should have Hankel function, okay, because waves are traveling outside. However, again, we should have some function which represents the location of your, which should have some kind of footprint of your location of line source. And that is, let's say that function which we don't know yet is small g beta rho prime, okay. So when we have that, so this is going to be your function for the second region, okay. So for the first region, this is the function in terms of infinite summation, and for the second region, this is going to be your function in terms of infinite summation. Now what are we going to do is, we are going to equate these two functions at rho equals to rho prime. So we know that at this boundary, let me just erase all this, clear out this geometry slide. So we know that at rho equals to rho prime, which is the basically highlighted by green dotted line here. Let me just highlight again. So we are talking about this particular boundary. When rho is equals to rho prime, your fields have to be continuous, right? Your fields have to be continuous. That means we can equate whatever field expression we have for the region 1 and whatever expression we have for the region 2 at this particular boundary. We can equate them to each other. So that's what we will do. We will equate these two expressions. Okay, we are going to equate these two expressions, this one and this one, with each other when rho is equals to rho prime. So again, this is the equation for the first region, and as we mentioned that we have only Bessel function of first kind. We don't want Bessel function of second kind because we want a finite field at rho equals to 0. Okay, same thing for the second region. Since we have outward traveling wave, we only want Hankel function of second kind. We don't want Hankel function of first kind. And also, because we have like periodicity, obviously we will have this function which represents the periodicity in the phi direction. Again, we have gone through all these things when we discussed chapter 9, right? It's a similar thing. So based on that, at rho equals to rho prime, okay, basically we equate these two with each other. And what we see is, basically if you look at that here for the rho prime, okay, for the rho prime, what will happen? I think there is some mistake here. Let me just, okay. So I think, so this first function here, f beta rho prime times jn beta rho. So this should be beta rho ideally, okay, beta rho ideally. And this should be, again here, Hankel function should have first beta rho only. However, after that, once you have beta rho, okay, what will happen? We said that rho is equals to rho prime. And as a result of that, here this will become rho prime, here this will become rho prime. Those are the rho. now that have become rho prime. Those have become rho prime because we are looking at rho equals to rho prime, observing at the rho equals to rho prime distance. And when we do that and when we equate, we know that this Bessel function has to be equals to this g function, right? And this f function has to be equals to this Henkel function. There is no other choice, right? And also this coefficient, amplitude coefficient Cn should be equals to Dn, because this left hand side and right hand side are equal. That's what we have, that's what ideally the simplest function should be, right? Simplest function should be something like this. And when we do that, when we equate these two, okay, what will happen is, as I mentioned, you will come up with these functions, that Cn is equals to Dn equals to Bn. We are going to define a common amplitude coefficient Bn, small bn, and your f of rho prime is going to be Henkel function of second kind, and your g of b rho is going to be Bessel function of the first kind. Now, when we do that, this is going to be your Henkel function of the second kind with this displaced argument, okay, displaced argument rho minus rho prime. That's where we started, right? If you remember, that's where we started. Now on the right hand side, this is going to be your expression, okay, for first region, and this is going to be your expression for the second region. Okay, now we still don't know what is the value of that small bn. How do we get that bn? For that, we are also going to take another specific case. What we are going to do is, we are going to move our source, our line source to the x-axis. First, we will move that to x-axis. That means phi prime is going to be equals to 0. Then what we will do is rho prime is equals to, we will make rho prime equals to infinite. So in order to find the value of that bn, amplitude coefficient, common amplitude coefficient, what we are going to do is, we are going to apply two boundaries or two basically conditions for the line source location, that rho prime is equals to infinite. We are in the very much far field, our line source is in the far field, and your phi prime is going to be 0. That is basically your line source is in the far field and is along the x-axis. It's on the x-axis. When we apply those two basically approximations, that rho prime tends to infinity and phi prime equals to 0, what will happen is your this rho minus rho prime, that is given by this particular expression, if you remember from the laws of cosine. And what we will do is, when we apply this approximation, it is given by this particular reduced expression. Okay, this particular reduced expression we have got rid of. We have got rid of basically phi prime, because phi prime is 0 and rho prime is much larger than rho. So we will also have basically some parts which will be negligible to compare to other part. Now what we are going to do is, so this is going to be our approximation for this particular observation or location of your source. And we also know that when the argument is very large, your Henkel function of second kind can have this asymptotic expression, right? So when the argument is very large for the Henkel function of the second kind, we know that you can represent that in terms of exponential function. So here, since this rho prime is much larger than rho cosine phi, because rho prime we are saying that it is in the far field, and your observation point is for most part is going to be much smaller than rho prime. Okay, so we are saying that rho prime is going to be much greater than rho cosine phi, and when we do that we can apply this asymptotic expression. So when we do that, this is your argument, so we will apply that asymptotic expression. So this is going to be your asymptotic expression for this Henkel function of second kind. Further, we know that rho prime is much greater than rho cosine phi, so we will get rid of this from here. Okay, we will get rid of that from there. So this is your denominator, okay, under the square root. And again, if we divide this in two components, this exponential function in two components, we know that, oh, this is what we just derived, right? For the plane waves, when we discuss that if you have a plane wave, e to the power minus j beta x or e to the power minus j beta rho cosine phi, we represented that as a summation, infinite summation of Bessel function. So that's what we are doing. Instead of negative, now we are positive. Okay, so with we will make some changes. Instead of negative n, we will have now positive n. Okay, but we can apply the same infinite summation for that plane wave component, this exponential e to the power minus j, or here e to the power plus j beta rho cosine phi. We can represent that by this particular infinite summation in terms of Bessel function, right? So that's what we do. So this is our first form. Okay, this is the first form where we have a Hankel function of second kind represented by this expression. Okay, okay, are you with me? Okay, now remember that we started from this. We have started from this. So now what we are going to do is, and we are trying to find Bn. We are trying to find Bn. So what we did is, first we found that, okay, if we have this assumption that rho prime is equals to infinite and phi prime equals to 0, then this left hand side Hankel function of second kind can be written by this expression. Okay, this is a left hand side. Now let's go to right hand side. Now this is your right hand side, right? This is a right hand side. Just we just derived, but we don't know what is the value of Bn. Now what we will do is, again, since our rho prime is much larger, okay, it's in the far field, so that beta rho prime is a very large argument. Again, we can write or substitute the asymptotic expression for the Hankel function of the second kind. So that's what we do on the right side as well. So when we do that on the right hand side, that's what here we are doing. So this is your asymptotic expression for this Hankel function of the second kind. Okay, and when we do that, this is going to be our function. And when we equate this expression with the left hand side, this is our right hand side. Now when we equate this with the right hand side, we can compare that, okay, this Bn, okay, is nothing but 1. So here that is nothing but 1. If you look at, if you focus, let me just erase. Since this lecture is so much of math, I think I have to erase slides again and again. Anyways, so what we are doing is, when we compare that, and if you focus on this sigma, this is the summation. If you look at this summation, then you have here 1 times j to the power plus n Bessel function of nth order e to the power minus j n phi. Now look at this. In this expression, again, let me just clear out this. So in this expression, let me highlight. In this expression, if you look at this summation, you have extra Bn. Otherwise, j to the power n Bessel function of nth order and e to the power j n phi is the same as you have on the left hand side. So that means this Bn is nothing but equals to unity. So value of Bn is nothing but unity. Bn equals to 1. So now we have a value of Bn. So by doing that, when we substitute the value Bn equals to 1, unity, this is your final expression for the Hankel function of the second kind for this particular problem. So for the first region, this will be your expression, and for the second region, this will be your expression, right? Now, what we are going to do is, using this, we can write the E field by the line source, electrical line source. EZ component can be represented by these expressions, right? That's what we wanted to do, that your line source is there will be electrical line source, there will be some EZ component, and that EZ component initially was represented by Hankel function of second kind with some displaced argument, rho minus rho prime. Now what we have two different expressions for that Hankel function of second kind in terms of Bessel and Hankel function, Bessel and Hankel function, right, for two regions. And correspondingly, we have two expressions for your E fields radiated by your line source. okay, in terms of infinite summation of Bessel and Henkel function. Okay, so this particular equation 11.69a and 11.69b is nothing but it is called the addition theorem of Henkel function. So that's what the addition theorem of Henkel function states, that if you have a Henkel function of second kind with displaced argument rho minus rho prime, then you can write them in terms of infinite summation of multiplication of Bessel function and Henkel function. Same thing, similar way, you can also derive the addition theorem of Henkel function for the first kind for something like this. Okay, again you will have two types of expression where you will have a Bessel function and Henkel function of first kind. Again Bessel function and Henkel function of first kind for two different regions, when rho is less than or equal to rho prime, and the second region rho is greater than or equal to rho prime. And this is nothing but addition theorem of Henkel function. Now using that, again we can also derive something like addition theorem of Bessel function, right? So it's very simple. So, and it's very simple and straightforward. So we know that Henkel function of first kind is nothing but a summation of Bessel function of first kind and Bessel function of second kind, like this. Something like if you remember, even from rectangular coordinates, your exponential function is nothing but a summation of sine and cosine, right? It's a Euler's theorem. Sine theta plus j cosine theta plus j sine theta, right? That is e to the power j theta, right? In the similar way for circular coordinate system, your Henkel function of first kind is a summation of j 0 beta rho plus j capital Y beta rho. That is a Bessel function of first kind and Bessel function of second kind. Similarly, for Henkel function of second kind, it is given by this one. It is given by this expression 11.72b, that it is a subtraction of Bessel function from the Bessel function of second kind from the Bessel function of the first kind. It's a same it's a similar way we define exponential functions. We write exponential functions in sines and cosine. Okay, and what we do is we just add those two, Henkel function of first kind and Henkel function of second kind, and from that we can write the Bessel function in terms of Henkel function. And what we do is we apply the addition theorem of Henkel function to both of these Henkel functions of first kind and second kind. And when we do that with the displaced argument, basically we can write the Bessel function with the displaced argument like this. Okay, we will have two different expressions for two different regions, but when you basically simplify those two expressions, you will see that you get the same expression for both regions. So basically addition theorem for Bessel function of first kind has only single expression, that is given by 11.77 from the book. Okay, for the both the regions you have a same expression. Now same thing you can also do for the Bessel function of second kind. So for the Bessel function of second kind, again for the first region you will have this expression, and for second region you will have this expression. Okay, so this is nothing but addition theorem for the Bessel functions. So what we have done in this lecture up till until now is, first we discussed the scattering from the finite rectangular plate for two polarization T to X, Tm to X, right? We derive the scattered field as well as the radar cross section for that. In that process, towards the end also we went through the radar cross section for the circular plate. Okay, after that we showed that how can we write the plane wave in terms of a cylindrical coordinate system, and also when you have a line source which is displaced, okay, which is displaced from the origin, from the z-axis, how do we write those expression, how do we write them so that we have a proper expression in terms of rho and rho prime, separate expression. And that's what for that we use some theorems, addition theorem of Henkel function and addition theorem of Bessel function. So this is the foundation which we have built in this lecture, and in the coming lecture, in the next lecture, we will continue our discussion on this scattering from that cylindrical structure with a circular symmetry. So circular cylinder, we will consider that, and we will see how do we derive the expression for these scattered fields from that structure using these theorems. Okay. Again, this is a summary what I just mentioned, that we went through the derivation, that how do we represent plane wave in terms of infinite summation of Bessel function. Okay, these are the two expression, plane wave going in positive x direction and plane wave going in a negative x direction. Then this is the basically addition theorem of the Hankel function, and this is the addition theorem for the Bessel function of first kind and second kind. So we will stop our lecture today here, and we will going to continue from here on. In the next lecture, we will continue discussing about the scattering from the circular cylinders. Okay, so okay, nothing else. See you next time in the next lecture, and till that, stay home, stay safe.